Okay, let's try and get our heads around this. $14 billion.
Yeah.
That is what U.S. companies are spending every year on leadership development. Just think about that number for a moment. It's huge.
It's a mountain of money, truly.
And yet, here's the kicker. Only 7%, just 7% of senior managers actually think their companies are doing a good job developing global leaders.
7%.
That's it.
It's almost unbelievable.
Right. So for you listening, someone who, really values getting smart, efficient knowledge and wants to know what actually moves the needle, that disconnect, it must feel incredibly frustrating, like hitting a wall.
Oh, absolutely. It signals this massive inefficiency, doesn't it? Where all this effort, all this resource just isn't hitting the mark. What's really interesting here, I think, isn't that companies aren't trying, but maybe they're fundamentally misunderstanding what it takes to grow leaders.
Exactly. So that's our mission for this deep dive. We are going to unpack why. Why does this huge investment seem to give such, frankly, poor returns? We got some really sharp insights here from McKinsey and Company, an article called Why Leadership Development Programs Fail. And they've basically nailed down 4 big mistakes that tend to sink these kinds of initiatives. So our goal today is to pull out those key lessons, the really actionable stuff that helps you understand not just where things go wrong, but actually how to maybe do it right.
Yeah, how to build something that works. Because avoiding these mistakes isn't just, about saving money. It's about actually developing leaders who can handle complexity, who can motivate their teams, and ultimately drive the business forward.
Okay, let's dive in. Mistake number 1 they flag is overlooking context. Now, this sounds maybe a bit like common sense, but it's apparently a massive reason these programs fail.
Right. The basic idea is leadership isn't this, universal skill set you can just apply anywhere.
One size fits all doesn't work.
Exactly. What makes a leader effective is so tied to the specific situation, right? The company's strategy, its culture, it all plays a huge role.
So the takeaway is effective leadership needs a tailored approach. It depends on the battlefield, you could say.
That's a great way to put it. And the article gives this really vivid example. A CEO of a big European services company. He was fantastic when the market was booming, great at innovation, expansion.
Okay.
But then the economy turned sour. Downturn hits. And suddenly he faltered.
Yeah.
Badly. He just kept pushing those same growth strategies, completely missed the need to adapt.
Didn't read the room, basically. Or the market.
Pretty much. And eventually they had to replace him. It just shows that what worked before isn't guaranteed to work when the context shifts.
Really hammers home that point. Success isn't portable sometimes. So
Yeah.
the article says, before you even think about program content, companies need to ask, what's the specific point of this program? What are we actually trying to fix or build here?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Like if your company grows through buying other companies, through M&A, you need leaders who are great strategists, good at integration. That's totally different from a company growing organically, from the inside out. There, you might need leaders who are brilliant at, say, nurturing talent.
So the development has to be tied directly to the company's strategic direction. It can't just be this separate HR thing.
It has to be integrated. But it seems many companies fall into this trap of creating these incredibly complicated competency models. The article calls it an alphabet soup of recommendations.
Alphabet soup. I like that.
Yeah, like this endless list of every possible leadership virtue, right?
Yeah.
Noble goals, maybe, but totally impractical. How do you even teach or measure all that?
You can't, really. So what's the fix for the alphabet soup?
Well, the article suggests being much more focused. Pinpoint just 2 or 3 really critical capabilities that will make the biggest difference in your specific business context.
Okay, focus is key. And they have an example of this, right? A bank.
Yeah, European retail bank. They wanted to boost sales performance. And they figured out that the real bottleneck wasn't some, high-level strategy thing. It was the practical skill of persuading and motivating peers, people they didn't directly manage.
Influencing without authority. That's a tough one.
Exactly. In their case, sales managers needed to get the IT department on board to make changes that would help sales. So the bank focused its training specifically on that influencing skill.
And did it work?
Apparently, yes. A 15% jump in productivity. A direct result of that very targeted development.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
That really shows the power of context. And it's not just organizational context, is it? It applies to individuals, too.
Absolutely. The best programs, according to McKinsey, map out a personal from-to path for each leader, recognizing everyone's starting point is different.
Like that Asian engineering company example.
Exactly. The leadership factory idea. They needed tons of managers for huge projects. So instead of one generic program, they identified 3 key leadership transitions.
What were they?
Well, you had like tendering experts needing to become business builders. Then project executors need to step up to be project directors, managing stakeholders and complexity. And finally, support function managers needing broader business skills.
And they tailored training for each specific jump.
Precisely. That's super context aware. They weren't just throwing everyone into the same pot.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Let's move to mistake number 2. Decoupling reflection from real work.
Ah, yes, the classic training dilemma.
Right. We all know there's value in stepping away, going off-site, having time to think, but
But the learning doesn't always stick when you get back to the chaos of the day job. The article quotes some pretty stark numbers. We retain, what, maybe 10% from lectures?
only 10%.
Yeah. Compare that to almost 2/3 retention when we learn by doing. The big challenge is transferring those off-site aha moments into actual lasting changes in behavior back at work.
They just evaporate. So the
Yeah.
solution seems kind of obvious then. Link the development directly to real, on-the-job projects, things that actually matter to the business.
Obvious, maybe, but tricky to execute well. You need to find projects that meet real business needs and offer genuine growth opportunities for the person. That's a tough balance.
And they have a cautionary tale here too, don't they?
Oh yeah, the medical device company story. This poor employee puts loads of effort into a real work project for their leadership program,
Okay.
only to find out it's basically pointless because a full-time team is already doing the exact same thing.
Ouch. That's incredibly demotivating.
Totally. And the employee ended up leaving the company. What a waste, right? Shows what happens when development isn't truly aligned with what the organization actually needs.
Definitely a lesson there.
Yeah.
But there's a positive flip side.
Yes, the International Construction Company example.
Mhm.
A multi-year program for mid-level leaders, explicitly designed to help deliver key projects on time and on budget.
So the development was baked into the project delivery itself.
Exactly. Participants picked real projects they were working on. Their development goals were tied to specific behaviors needed for that project. Like, one leader needed to get better at dealing with senior clients and coaching his team for a big contract bid.
And the outcome?
Positive. He made progress on the contract negotiations, and people actually saw a change in how he led. It shows that integrating the work and the learning can have a powerful, measurable impact.
Makes total sense. You learn it, you immediately apply it where it counts. And they mentioned this is especially valuable in emerging markets.
Yeah, where the need for leaders is often urgent, and big projects themselves become prime learning grounds. It creates this positive cycle. Business needs drive relevant development, and that development helps achieve the business goals.
Right, okay. That leads us nicely into the third mistake. Underestimating mindsets.
Ah, this one's fascinating. Because we often focus on the visible stuff, right? Skills, behaviors.
Yeah, the how-tos.
But this point argues that real, lasting change in leadership often means changing behavior. And to do that, you have to get at the underlying mindsets. The thoughts, the feelings, assumptions, beliefs. The stuff below the surface.
That sounds potentially uncomfortable.
It can be. The article admits that. It requires looking inward, maybe challenging some deeply held beliefs. They use this great analogy. It's like an athlete feeling muscle pain during training.
Don't love the pain, but it means you're growing.
Exactly. If there's no discomfort, maybe no real change is happening. It's not about blame, but recognition. Like, you can teach someone the concept of delegation all day long.
Right.
But if their core mindset is, I have to control everything or only I can do it right, they're just not going to delegate effectively. The underlying belief blocks the behavior.
So the training bites us off.
Pretty much. Now, the article does say some core personality traits are hard to shift, but mindsets, values, those can change. The key is first identifying what those limiting beliefs are.
And they have examples of this too.
Sure. The professional services firm where senior folks felt really insecure discussing anything outside their specific expertise, recognizing that imposter feeling was the first step to addressing it.
Okay.
Or the industrial company resisting delegating spending decisions.
Yeah.
Digging deeper, they found leaders were worried about more work, didn't trust their teams, or just didn't want to lose control.
Understandable fears, maybe.
Totally. But they had to surface those fears to overcome them. Showing the benefits like saving time, developing juniors, and using peer pressure, basically, helps shift that hero leader mindset.
So bringing those hidden barriers out into the open is crucial. And there was one more example. about sales managers.
Ah, yes. The company where sales managers kept doing bad deals just to hit market share targets, even after finance training.
Why? What was the mindset?
Obsession with market share above all else, basically. Profitability wasn't the driver. It took more than just training to fix it.
What did they do?
They set up a control tower to review deals collectively, used peer coaching from managers who got the new profit focus, and had the CEO constantly reinforcing the right message. You have a whole system approach to shift that ingrained belief.
It really shows changing mindsets isn't just a quick fix. It takes concerted effort, reinforcement.
And often, peer influence and strong signals from the top.
Mm-hmm.
It's about shaping the culture.
Right. Okay, finally, the fourth mistake. Failing to measure results.
The accountability gap.
Seems basic for business, right? Measure what matters. But apparently lots of companies just don't when it comes to leadership development ROI.
And if you don't measure it, how do you know if it's working? How do you justify the spend? The article makes a strong point. Without tracking and measuring leadership performance changes, these programs are less likely to be taken seriously.
And they caution against relying too much on just the happy sheets, right?
Yeah.
Participant feedback.
Exactly. It's easy for trainers to just focus on making people feel good, rather than delivering challenging content that actually drives change.
Yeah.
You can game that system.
So what should companies measure?
Well, the article argues you absolutely can and should set clear targets and track them. Just like any business initiative, apply the same rigor.
Okay, like what kinds of metrics?
Several approaches. One is measuring actual behavior change using 360-degree feedback before and after the program. They even mention a CEO sharing his own 360 results publicly.
Wow, that sends a message.
Definitely signals commitment. Another way is tracking career progression, promotions, retention rates for people who went through the program versus those who didn't. Like that global bank example, linking participation to promotion success.
Makes sense. Track the outcomes.
And then, crucially, measure the business impact, especially if the development is tied to those real work projects we talked about.
So track cost savings, new store openings, product sales, whatever the project was meant to achieve.
Precisely. They give examples like Amex looking at team productivity changes, or a nonprofit comparing revenue growth between trained and untrained teams, tangible results.
It really comes back to that old saying, what gets measured gets managed. If you don't measure leadership development outcomes, you're kind of flying blind.
You really are. You're missing huge opportunities to improve the programs and actually demonstrate their value to the business. It's about seeing it as an investment needing a return, not just an expense.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've explored why these incredibly expensive leadership programs often disappoint. McKinsey points to 4 key traps.
Right. First, ignoring context, treating leadership as one size fits all. Second, separating the learning, the reflection, from the actual day-to-day work.
Third, underestimating how much deep-seated mindsets drive behavior. And fourth, just failing to measure if any of it actually makes a difference.
And the big picture here is that effective leadership development isn't some off-the-shelf course. It needs to be strategic, deeply woven into the company's context, and focused on individual journeys.
So the core message for you listening is that understanding these pitfalls helps everyone, companies, individuals, invest time and resources way more effectively, moving beyond just, spending money to actually getting real results.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about making development count.
Exactly. So maybe a final thought to leave you with. How does this apply to your own learning and development? Whether you manage a team, want to lead, or are just focused on your own growth, are you considering the context?
Are you actively applying what you learn in the real world? Are you examining your own underlying beliefs, the mindsets that might be helping or hindering you?
And what does success actually look like for you? What metrics truly show growth and impact? Something to think about how these insights might just change how you approach your own development journey.